Welcome, Freedom Fanatics. Simo here. Today, the hosting duties are all mine. I'm without my regular partner in crime, Kila, who would have loved to join today's episode, but unfortunately has had to miss out. But on a positive note, we do have ourselves a really interesting guest, a person whom, from the little I've managed to gather about him, is a real libertarian, Mr. Dumo Denga. Dumo is an Austro-Libertarian, founder and co-host of the ManPatria podcast. Dumo, pleasure to meet you, sir, and glad to have you on. How are you doing today?
Hi, Simo. Nice to meet you. I'm doing very well. And yes, thanks for having me. Looking forward to having a great conversation.
Awesome stuff, Dumo. Just to kick off today's conversation, I'd like to read the short and hopefully very famous quote by Winston Churchill. Everyone is in favor of free speech. Hardly a day passes without its being as told. But some people's idea of it is that they are free to say whatever they like, but if anyone says anything back, that is an outrage. So I really thought this is a really poignant quote from Sir Churchill, and I thought it would be a perfect conversation opener for today, because you and I are both podcast hosts. We both use this platform. I'd like to think we're both proponents of free speech, and so I just wanted to kick off with that one. As a podcast host and founder yourself, I thought who better to have such a conversation than with you, sir. And I know that we both have our qualms with mainstream media, so I'm just keen on hearing your thoughts on the outlet provided by alternative media platforms. So I guess I'll just start off by asking, how important is alternative media to you as a host, as a founder, and as a frequent guest, and I guess also as a consumer of podcasts and stuff? And how important is it as well to the general public at large?
Yeah, so I think alternative media is a great form of media. It's a type of media that allows people that have ideas on certain issues to voice them on a platform and get feedback by viewers on that particular platform. I think alternative media is something that I felt plays a great role. So, for example, I mean, if you look at, I'll just give you one typical example with regards to soccer, right? So, there's that channel called AFTV on YouTube. I think they're the biggest fan cam channel in the world. Huh? Oh, you're Arsenal fan. I see.
Yeah, it's a good time for us.
So, I mean, where they started off, and, one of the criticisms that they got was that, they were, profiting off Arsenal's failure and everything. But these criticisms came from mainstream media. And I remember the head of that whole thing, as they referred to him as Don Robbie, stated that, no, the problem is that people are threatened by AFTV because now they are allowing a platform for fans to voice their opinions. And you've seen a lot of famous fan cammers have become famous because of AFTV. I mean, the list goes on. So I think what mainstream media, well, not mainstream, but what alternative media has done, it has offered people that would not likely get a voice to have a voice, and for that voice to be put out there so that people can actually listen to it, watch it, do whatever they want with it. And Arsenal Fan TV, or well, now they call themselves AFTV rather, were perfect in doing that. And I think what that has allowed, it's allowed people to hear another side that was not necessarily heard by mainstream media. Because again, if you look at mainstream media, their model is built on trying to get as much ad revenue as possible. And usually that means that if they get someone with a prominent voice on their show, more people would watch, therefore they get higher ratings, and therefore the ad revenue goes up. So, and as a result of that kind of like singled out other people that may have good points on certain issues, and they will never get heard. And then alternative media actually brings those people that would never get usually heard on a mainstream media platform. And it's really difficult to go there. And you see the people that do go on mainstream media, they have particular views, they're safe, in terms, when I say safe, I'm saying they're safe for mainstream media in terms of maximizing their revenue. And, and so they just get relied on a lot, and then people become complacent. And I think what mainstream media, not mainstream, but alternative media has made it a bit uncomfortable for a lot of mainstream media players. Because a lot of these guys, some of them, they just wake up, open up YouTube or whatever platform they're on and broadcast, and then they'll get like so many views, which is much more than what some mainstream media platforms actually get on a daily basis. So definitely these guys have become a threat to mainstream media. And as a result, you've kind of seen that like the platforms that host the alternative media people have now kind of, I wouldn't say they shook hands, but now they're starting to allow the mainstream media to like take more of a dominant stance on their platform. So for example, let's look at YouTube. YouTube is known for bringing out a lot of alternative media, but then now you see, even now when you open your YouTube, there's a tab called News, and there you see all the mainstream media outlets there. And now I'm like, well, doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose of YouTube in a sense? But basically that's what has happened over time. So when it comes to news, for me, I don't go to mainstream media. I listen to a lot of alternative media, or I'll read rather, as a way just to consume it. But when it comes to like, the big mainstream guys, the only thing I really watch from mainstream media is soccer at the end of the day and some other sports. But news and so forth, no, I tend to listen to others because, again, the alternative media, when you listen to them, even if you do disagree with what they say, you can still interact with them, as long as you send a super chat, I assume, and they respond, so at least you get a response. If your donation is big enough, they'll answer your question. Some of them are very accessible. They have social media accounts, and others, if they don't have social media, you can just go on their website and then just submit a question, and then they might respond via email. So I think alternative media has allowed people that are more relatable to viewers to voice their opinion, and that, in my opinion, I think works very well, especially in a situation where you, as a viewer, you were just watching people for a long time, but you couldn't interact with them, and now you got this guy who's saying something that you like or may not like, but now he's giving you a chance to interact in a meaningful way, and that's why I think alternative media is very important.
100%. I actually agree with all of what you said. I'm happy that you used the Arsenal example. I'm sure you can tell by the smile in my face. It's actually calmed me down for this podcast as well. I'm always on AFTV media. If you just pop on my Instagram, it's the first thing you'll see. And yeah, I love the points you made about how alternative media has allowed for us to better engage with the people who are providing the news or the content that we consume. And that's probably I was actually going to ask you what are the biggest shortcomings of mainstream media, but you already touched on a few of them. If there's more, feel free to continue. Where has mainstream media failed us as the public?
Yeah, so I think what has happened with mainstream media is that their customers are not the viewers. That's the thing. So I'm actually currently writing a piece now on social media companies committing the same error. Well, not same error, but let's say it's not like they're making a mistake in the sense that, they're being dumb. It's just like, when you get complacent and then you just see things going in a certain pattern, and then you just fall into that pattern because it's like, well, if I go in the other direction, I'm just going to make things worse for myself. So I think what has happened is that with mainstream media, they've seen that the money is with the advertisers. So all you just need to do is, get a lot of money, get some broadcasting license from, I don't know, I'm not saying that there is one, but you know how it is. Like you get a broadcasting license and then you just have talk shows and news shows and soapies and whatever, and then you just slot adverts in between, and then that's how you get your money. Now, what has happened is that, you know, the one mistake that has occurred is just that over time, the viewers were not the customers. It was always the advertisers. And then what that did as a result is that the viewers kind of fell to the wayside. So it was always about what does the advertiser want? How can we slot adverts in a show? So I don't know if you've seen these old Dragon Ball Z episodes, right? And if you've seen how they structured, right? You'll find at the beginning, like the first 3 minutes, they tell you what happened in the last episode. And then sometimes you'll hear the narrator of Dragon Ball Z saying, you know, will Goku defeat this person? Come back later. And well, after these messages. Yeah, they'll say, come back after these important messages, right? But now if you're the type of guy that just downloaded these episodes from, you know, some streaming site, you know, you could see that the adverts would, I mean, well, not advert, but the show was designed to fit adverts in, right? Because again, you know, they needed to cover the costs of the production and everything like that and so forth. So it was not necessarily the viewers taken into account. And I remember I had a discussion with someone close to me about this. And he said to me, yo, but it's so annoying, man. Like, I can't imagine myself watching TV back then knowing what I know now. Because like advert here, advert there, when something big's about to happen, cut to an advert, or we'll see you next time, that type of thing. So that's like an example of media, what's the right word? Media catering for the advertisers. Yeah. Exactly. And now they can't, it doesn't happen as much, right? Because now you saw streaming services coming along, and then you saw Netflix coming along and so forth. But now even then in that situation, I mean, that's another topic to branch off on. But even in those situations, you could say that some of these streaming companies actually fail their customers, or they fail, but at least in that sense, they're failing their customers. It's not they're failing someone that they're using to try and entice a customer. So I think the biggest failure is just that they forgot that their viewers can also be customers for their products. And that's where it failed. And you see that in the news as well. You've seen they're very condescending on certain things. Sometimes when the news or mainstream media news, when they get something totally wrong, right, they will explain it in a very condescending manner. And you just like do these guys think we're stupid, right? It's like, what is going on here, right? And that's another thing as well. Because you, the viewer, they think you're so dumb enough to believe everything they say. They don't even put quality in the actual production, right? Because they're just creating that show so that they can just get the advertisers, so they can just sell advertising slots to the advertisers. And that's why some of it is just brain dead, you know, brain dead stuff. And that's a problem. If your viewers are not the customers, you're not going to create content for their sake. You're going to create content for the advertisers' sake. And then you're just going to hope that people who are naive enough to believe everything you say would watch it. Or sometimes they want the informed people to watch, and they want them to, you know, clip it and then post it on social media, because maybe that's the reason why they say these dumb things, is because they want people to be enraged and stuff like that. But either way, the primary customer are the advertisers, and as a result, viewers become second-class citizens in the media world. So that's the biggest failure.
Yeah, 100%. Just to piggyback off your point, I remember in preparation for this podcast, I watched Joe Rogan's podcast, very famous, obviously. Now, obviously, he hates the mainstream media. You just need to watch like 2 episodes of any podcast. He's gonna make a comment on the mainstream media. And in this one conversation, they were talking about how boxed in the news is, like the news that we consume. You find someone, the presenter of the show, has an earpiece in their ear. So that's when you say something that's like off track, that's when you get called in, you're reeled in back to remain back within the box. And I think what's really appealed to the consumers of alternative media is that there's a genuineness of alternative media. There's an authenticity, you know. even when someone says something that's actually repulsive, not just something you disagree with, that's actually repulsive, you kind of, you resonate with the genuineness that they're trying to approach whatever topic it is that they're approaching. And I think that the really grounded way alternative media has come across has really been good for viewers who really care about the content they consume. Because like you said, mainstream media is just after that typical nonchalant viewer who's just going to sit there and consume, not think, and listen to robots speak robot stuff. So yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. And just to further, I've always thought, the reason I began with the free speech quotes is that I've always thought that why isn't mainstream media the place where there's absolute free speech? You know, like I know it's a commercial machine, and we're feeding into the interests of advertisers. But like for news, for instance, news should be the most free speech thing there is out there, because it's the truth that we want to hear as viewers. So how do you think advertisers manage to worm their way or worm their interests into the news that we consume right now?
Yeah. I like the way you phrased the question. I don't think the advertisers were being malicious and like, hey, they weren't like, oh, here's some money, and if you speak about this topic, you're done. No, I don't think it's like that. I think what happens is that when you as a news station, you start to see the money that you get from advertising, you start to cater everything towards the advertiser. You don't want to piss them off. You don't want to make them uncomfortable. You don't want to give them any reason to leave. So sometimes you will be proactive in your in trying to retain them as a customer. So and I think as a result of that, it's like, hey, let's say there's a story that's a big story, right? And then, well, let me not say it's a big story. Let's just say it's a story that should be heard, but because now, you know what, people are more interested in other topics, or that's what you may think, then you'll just go for that one because you'll go for that one because, hey, at least that way we'll keep the advertiser money, and at the same time we won't, offend many people. So I think that's what has happened. People have protected their customer. We cannot say protected, but they want to keep their advertisers so much that they're willing to sacrifice other things, because at least then they can say, well, okay, maybe if we make them angry, then we're going to lose them, as we'll lose that funding, and then and so forth. So they want to avoid that. So I don't think the advertisers are necessarily doing anything bad. I think it's just people being a bit paranoid, right? And the news stations being a bit paranoid. But at the same time, there's also a cultural thing. So you've seen in universities and stuff like that, a lot of people have become very sensitive, but not in a good way. Like, for example, there are some topics that, you have to approach with sensitivity. But now the problem is that there are topics that we could discuss in the open, and now you can't discuss them anymore, especially on a platform that's meant to, discuss these type of issues. Now, like, for example, if you work in the workplace, you're not going to discuss things like religion and, and culture and stuff like that, right? Because, you don't want to, cause a rift at work, because you want to have production, you want to be productive at work, right? Which I think makes sense. However, on the mainstream platforms, they're supposed to be discussing those things, right? So, but now as a result of that, as a result of people becoming a bit more sensitive, the topics that were meant to be discussed on mainstream media platforms are no longer being discussed because now the viewers get offended so easily. So that's another part as well, is that over time, you've got the interest of the advertisers on one hand, and then you don't want to make anyone angry on the other hand, and then, then you create this bland, above average content that serves no purpose. That's what happens.
just above average content.
Yes.
I'm sure it's going to come as no surprise to our viewers and listeners that podcast hosts are going to be the guys bashing mainstream media. That's all I've been thinking about, because all we've done is just list the negatives and negatives of mainstream media. But just to move on and tailor the conversation towards you're a founder of your own podcast. You're also a co-host. So firstly, from my point of view, I actually just want to know, what does ManPatria mean? And then and tell us a bit about your journey towards ManPatria. Like, what were your intentions, your motivations at the time to found your podcast?
Yeah, so the name was just a way to trigger lefties. So, you know, we just wanted a way to stand out. It was excellent.
I'm sorry, that's the funniest thing I've heard today.
That was the idea behind it, because I could have like started a podcast and called it, the Liberty Podcast, Liberty this, and now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that people should not think of those conventions. That could actually work in your favor, right? But I just felt that it was a bit too boring. I felt that it was also a bit too formal of a name, and it can also be buried among other podcasts that have similar names or have similar purposes. So I think ManPatria was ManPatria. I say ManPatria, and people say ManPatria, which is fine. I don't mind. And that's why we created that. So just to give you a background of it. So basically at that time, you know, the feminist movement, and when I say feminist, I'm not talking about the good feminist movement, the ones where they say men and women are different, but we're equal. You know, we don't like what you can call them, the equity feminists. So the equity feminists were the good ones. I'm talking about the gender feminists, the ones where they think there's something wrong with being a man, for example. Which is sexist, by the way.
Yes.
So
you found someone who's going to agree with you on these points. Don't worry about that.
Yes. So basically, this was just to trigger a lot, because to trigger a lot of people on the left, because the left has adopted this gender feminism. So for those of you who are listening, gender feminism, as I said before, is the idea that there's something wrong with men and that women have been eternally oppressed and everything and so forth, which is different to equity feminism, which is the idea that men and women are equal, but we are different. And because they are different doesn't necessarily mean that women should not have specific types of freedoms. So I was attacking the gender feminist specifically, okay? And so I put the word man and the word patriarchy. And then I said, okay, let's just put it together, let's create a word out of that. And then ManPatria came up, right? So then that's how it basically came up.
I thought it was patriotism. Wow.
Okay. If that's how you see it, then I'm glad you saw it that way. I'm actually glad you saw it that way. But it was only, what was very interesting was that a lot of there were a few gender feminists who came across the name and were asking, what is this? They thought this was like some sort of manosphere podcast where we're just going to bash women the whole day and say that men must have like 10 wives and everything, you know. They thought it was that, right? But it was nothing like that. So that's why, for example, on our website, we have an about section there, you know, about us, who are we? So people can just read it so they don't get confused. Because I understand that a name like that could cause confusion. So rather get them there with the name and then put some description there, hoping that it could actually clear out some confusion. But it didn't. A lot of the gender feminists, again, we never got a lot of traffic that way. In fact, a lot of our traffic came from people asking, "Oh, what does this mean? Oh, this is interesting," and everything. And then they couldn't put two and two together. But what was interesting, because this is in the lockdown, there was a guy that I used to play Call of Duty with, and I just met him randomly online. And I told him about my podcast, and then he saw that, and then he's like, oh, he saw the name, and he's like, oh man, were you trying to trigger some lefties there? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm so glad. He was the first person to get it, but he was like, no, great idea. But yeah, that's how the name came up.
Okay, wonderful. So what were your motivations at the time? Where did you want to see your brand or platform going?
Right. Okay. So at that time, all I just wanted was just to speak about topics about society and politics in a different way. I felt that a lot of the famous people, including those in alternative media, that were speaking about politics and society, were not really hitting the hard points. They weren't saying what needed to be said. Look, and I'm not going to name drop, but I think people know like the people that I'm talking about, right? And they were just like soft, and they were just being safe. And because of the fact that they're being safe, it's like, man, I might as well just go watch the mainstream instead of you. So, I mean, I decided to, start this podcast, and I first started by myself, and then Koketso and Nzuzo came later on, and then we started to discuss topics. I think we gained some decent traction. But not to my satisfaction. I felt that YouTube, because especially YouTube after the ad apocalypse, has become very difficult for voices to be heard, because unfortunately YouTube doesn't want to get in trouble with the US government. They don't want to go to court in different countries for allegedly changing election results and stuff like that. So especially after that whole Russia thing and so forth. So as a result, they became very critical of people that have political content, as I would call it. And I put political in inverted commas, or anything that's labeled as political. Those ones, they were treated with more scrutiny than someone, let's say, who wants to show you how to put on makeup. Now, don't get me wrong. I have no problem with makeup tutorials. I think a lot of people have found them useful. But you know what I'm saying? It's just like, it's safer to have someone putting on makeup tutorials and prank videos than to allow people that talk about politics to rise on the platform very quickly. Because as a result, you could attract the wrong attention from people. So as a result, YouTube has become that platform. But either way, we still gained some decent traction as a result. And I think, and then over time, our intentions changed. So before we were trying to discuss timeless topics, and then we went to more time-focused topics, or you would say topics that have a high time preference. That worked for a while, but you get burnout very quickly because one of the biggest disadvantages of creating content that has a high time preference is that there'll be a lot of things that you don't want to discuss, but because everyone's talking about it, you just got to mention it. So like you drag your feet to the show and then you just mention it, and then you don't even have an opinion on it. It's just like, yeah, so-and-so said this, yeah, whatever. But you have to like pretend that you're interested in this, right? But you're not. And, and then that just also becomes a bit of a problem. But either way, I enjoyed most of what I did. So yeah, that's ManPatria in a nutshell, and our journey of where we are. And right now, we're just focusing on written media. It just helps because with written media, what people just forget is that, especially for the creator can actually express themselves a bit better. The problem now is that when you do podcasts, people can now clip you and take your things out of context. I even saw on Twitter the other day, I just made a comment about social media and ad revenue, right? And people can just take that tweet out of context, right? And then respond to you as if you're an idiot. And I'm like, yeah, this is the problem.
I can tell by your little, sorry to I can tell by your little disclaimers, like when you mention feminism, like you made sure to like pull back a little bit just to make sure that if you get clipped, you have proof that you weren't trying to be disrespectful or speak in a very harmful sense. So I understand.
Exactly. That's the reason why I throw disclaimers everywhere. It's because of that. People just find anything, So, but now when you write a long form essay, you can kind of get you can get your point across in a very clear and coherent way, and also try to deal with any ambiguities along the way, which is great. But there's also a disadvantage to that as well. What happens is that a lot of people don't like to read long form content. That's what I've noticed. So then you're going to be getting another audience member. The audience that you're attracting there is not particularly the audience that you want to get. So it's very difficult. But I mean, I think what has helped is Twitter Blue. I think Twitter Blue will allow. Twitter Blue. Oh yeah. So Twitter Blue is this new feature on Twitter, right? First of all, you get a blue tick next to your name, which is cool. And then the second thing is that you can make longer tweets, 3,000 characters. And so then that way, if you make a tweet, you can always put your disclaimers there, right? Nicely, so that it's in one tweet. Instead of creating a thread and a guy just takes the first tweet of your thread and then makes a comment that's totally out of context and stuff like that. So that is helping. But as just go back to ManPatria, that's what we're doing now. But we're all going to come back with video content. It's just that I felt that maybe, I don't want to reveal too much, but I just wanted to say that we are going to come back to creating videos. And I think there is another avenue that we can actually thrive on. But it looks like written media works well. And the nice thing about it is that, especially if you're a content creator or podcaster, you want to create content that will look good because it's going to outlive you, right? So remember that our content is at some point is going to outlive us. So we need to make sure that if it's going to stay on the internet or stay somewhere, at least let's give our best, in that regard. So, and I think that's the new focus on the type of content that I would like to create for ManPatria going forward, especially in the videos and audio category.
Perfect. So I noticed on your site, also on your bio, everywhere is written you're an Austro-Libertarian. Mm-hmm. Perhaps maybe you can share with our viewers, what's that? Can I say theory? Yeah.
Okay.
Theory entail? What's Austro-Libertarian?
Okay, so basically, Austro-Libertarian is just a double-barrel word to show people that on one hand, I support the Austrian view of economics. So the view of economics that I support is of the Austrian school, and basically, what it does, it's basically a view of economics that looks at human behavior in the economy, and this is obviously it's in contrast to the Chicago school, where they try to take a scientific approach to the economy. As with me, I'm not in favor of that because, remember, human beings play a role in the economy. These are the guys that buy the products. These are the guys that make the purchasing decisions. And trying to throw that into an equation is not necessarily the greatest idea because each person has different circumstances that influence the purchasing decisions they make. Like, for example, I can go somewhere and buy, I can go to McDonald's and buy something from there. It doesn't mean that I'm hungry, right? I could just buy it because I wanted to take someone out or something like that, right? But then there are people who buy from McDonald's because that's the only thing that they can afford, right? And that type of thing. So now the problem is that now the Chicago school may look at it and think, okay, they will look at all the data and try to get a theory from that data. And I'm not a big fan of doing that because, again, human beings are also variables in this big economy. So basically, that's the Austrian view in a nutshell. We see the economy as a process, and we also see human beings playing an important role in the economy, so much so that you have to consider the incentives and human action in the economy as well. So that's the Austrian part. Then there's the libertarian part, right? So then you got Austro-Libertarian. So the libertarian, okay, so I'll give you the broad view of libertarianism, and I'll show you the branch of libertarianism that I follow. So the broad view of libertarianism is just basically an ideology that focuses on maximizing freedoms, but this is basically maximizing freedoms that have been imposed by the state. Sorry. So you'll find that what typically libertarians believe is that that you can't force a particular person to perform a particular action, even if that action will benefit that person or the group that's surrounding him. And that's where you'll find typically libertarians are not in favor of taxation, affirmative action, and other things, when, let's say, for example, when you get drafted into the army and so forth. So that's libertarianism in a nutshell, right? Then the branch of libertarianism that I follow is one that is very critical of the state. So it's one that recognizes the state, but also recognizes that the state is very invasive on human liberty. Okay, so there's many branches. There's ones that are anarchist, and even in anarchism, there's also positions there. But my position is that, look, I recognize that there is a state, but I'm saying that the state's existence and their purpose is very invasive to liberty. So just to give a quick rundown on that one, is that if you know what is the state? So the state is a I wouldn't say an entity. You can say an entity, but or an agency rather, that has an ultimate monopoly on taxation and an ultimate monopoly on a monopoly on ultimate decision making. So that means that when you tax, the state is the only organization that can tax, and the state has the last word on every conflict between its citizens, including conflicts that involve itself. And I'm saying that given those characteristics of the state, that is not in line with liberty, and that needs to change, right? And I believe in using peaceful means to change that. So I'm not that type of guy who's going to say that, oh, because the state, because I believe that taxation is theft. I'm not saying that now you must go to SARS and now hurt every SARS employee. No, we're not going to hurt SARS employees, but we just believe that the idea of taxation is morally wrong. Or for example, another thing is that the state has a monopoly on ultimate decision making, meaning that the state can actually cause conflict and then rule in its own favor. And then we're saying, no, that's not fair. We're not gonna go to the union buildings and perform some crazy attack there. No way, never do that. But we're saying such a situation is morally wrong, and that needs to change. And I think the best way to change it is through reason and convincing people. So that's Austro-Libertarianism in a nutshell. Yeah.
No, I fully understand it. The state makes the rules that they then again play by. And as a libertarian, you just want the distance between private people are private people. And I did see one of your latest tweets. It says privatize everything.
Yes.
So I'm still a bit, I'm going to say, new to your body, your school of thoughts, your body of views, and I'm going to do my research on it. Maybe I might just join you in the Austro-Libertarian school.
Great. But I mean, just on the privatize everything. So the idea behind that is that all these government services that people think belong exclusively to the government. So the people think that there are certain services that the government should have a monopoly over. All I'm saying is that those services can be provided by the market much more efficiently, and it will be much more affordable to those who, or let's say to the statists, who think that they are poor people who won't be able to afford those particular services. I think it'll be much cheaper if the market was allowed to actually determine the price of those services that belong exclusively to the government. So that's why I say privatize everything. It is a bit radical, but at the same time, it makes sense. I mean, look at ESCOM, for example, right? They they've had a monopoly, I mean, for I think over 100 years, right? And now, since 2007, they have produced 15% less electricity. Okay, so as of the end of, I think, 2022, they have produced less electricity than they did in 2007. And I think it's in the region of like 10 to 13%. Okay, yet, at the same time, ESCOM has spent close to over R500 billion on trying to increase its electricity generation. Now, if that happened in the private market, that would be a catastrophic failure, right? But again, with ESCOM, because they're owned by the state, they have no competition, such inefficiencies and such bad investment decisions are made. And I even said that if the private market was allowed to actually generate and sell electricity, the electricity would be cheaper than it is right now, and we wouldn't be having load shedding. Because right now there's a generator running at the back right now, and it's kind of loud, but I hope you don't hear it, but I can hear it. But that's the reason why I have a generator. The generator is not provided by the state, it's provided by the private market.
No, 100%. I actually did read your piece on the privatizing, getting private players into the electricity generation market. And I actually, again, I found myself agreeing with you a lot on this podcast. I hope the viewers don't take that like as something negative, but I do think it will be beneficial for the market if private players are let in, because right now, ESCOM is creating the rules that they then play by and also not follow. So we might as well get private players, and it will cheapen the product over time. It 100% will. If there are competitors in the markets, they will compete, and that's usually to the benefit of consumers.
Exactly. Exactly that.
Then I must say you write very well. So I just want to end off with a final question. It's quite long-winded, so please try and stay with me. I did write it down just to make sure that I go with this flow correctly. So obviously, the platforms which are alternative to mainstream media are for everyone, right? Like they're for everyone on every side of every argument. But it's fair to say that they have been more of a safe haven for those of us who perhaps hold the generally non-mainstream media supportive views, like libertarianism. It's not that popular. So what I have observed because of that fact is that I always feel like we are podcasting to ourselves, like we're creating content for ourselves. Because the whole idea behind us expressing our views publicly is to get the message out there, right? And to get, at the very least, get people thinking about it. But I've always felt like the views we express on our platforms find other like-minded people instead of finding those who would truly benefit from these views. For instance, using the libertarian example, I'm quite libertarian. We've just found out you're very libertarian. We both use our platforms to get the libertarian message out there. My problem is that I feel like more often than not, our message will find other libertarians, or at the very least, find people who are always likely to mesh with the libertarian agenda. Now, that's not really an issue, and that's not something I'm really against. Where I'm going with this is that how do we get this non-mainstream idea of libertarianism to mainstream media consumers who would much rather just turn on SABC and watch another EFF conference promising land for all, free education, social this, social that? Because those ideals, although we may not like to admit it, they're quite easy to digest. I mean, it's free this, free that, you get land, you get this. Unlike perhaps when you hop onto the ManPatria page and you see and hear words like private law society, Austrian and Libertarian, you see them being thrown around, and the ideas expressed there might seem quite nuanced for I'm not going to really say the ordinary or average viewer, but like the just below average viewer. So I guess my first question is that, have you also felt that way with regards to the content we create and who's taking it in? Like, do you feel like we're getting across to the people who really need to hear these things, like the people who are living in abject destitution? Like, they're the one that really needs to hear this because they are the voting majority in South Africa, if I'm correct. And then my second question, I guess, would be, is this the way, alternative media, the way that we have taken, the way of podcasting, writing articles, is this is this way effective enough to get the libertarian agenda to the rural public of South Africa?
Right. No, those are very, very good questions. Those are very good questions. And no, very clear. So let's answer the first one. So with regards to talking to ourselves, I think there is a high degree of that. I think that there is this thing where you create content and then you find that someone who's, let's say, a libertarian academic and so forth, or someone who, let's say, works at at a prestigious, libertarian institution comes along and says, hey, I like your stuff. And that happened with me, right? When I got other libertarians on my show, they loved it. They loved the website, everything. They were so fascinated by it, right? Because that's something they have a passion for. But now I think when it comes to libertarianism in the popular sphere. So let's before I answer the question, there's the academic sphere and the popular sphere. So the academic sphere, that's where all the academics debate and everything like that. And then you have the popular sphere. And the popular sphere is just generally what we are exposed to. Now, the thing is that it takes a while for ideas in the popular sphere to get into the in the academic sphere to get into the popular sphere. It's quite a long process, because remember, you see, the thing about libertarianism is that it's also a very difficult idea to promote in the face of, let's say, communism or statism, where let's say, for example, you say, look, the state, they tax, and taxation is wrong because I never consented to the state taking a portion of my property, right? Now, the statists would say, oh, but we need taxation for the roads, and we need it for the hospitals. And that idea takes advantage of the human desire to have someone else pay for certain things. And it's very hard to compete against that. So even if you do, so now I've heard people say, no, you need to go into the townships and you need to, or not townships, even rural areas, and you need to get a truck like the EFF and, blast music there and get people and you talk about this thing. And I'm like, yeah, I think we can do that. But I'm telling you, once they hear the message, they'll be like, yeah, but Julius Malema said free education, free this, free that. And this guy says I must pay. I'm like, no, cheers, guys. I mean, if an EFF truck had to come right next to us, they would take more people, because it's just that they know that these guys are poor. And again, let me not say that. They know that there's a lot of poverty in the country, and they know that there's a lot of services that the poor people need. Okay, and as a result of that, they know what dream they want to achieve. That one day you wake up, oh, there's something wrong with you. You just go to the hospital, doctor gives you a pill or whatever, and then you don't have to pay and you go home. Like that is ultimate. You can't beat that with libertarianism. You can't beat that with the libertarian ideal. So the only way you can do it, right, is that you're going to probably have to wait until people get sick and tired of hearing the free stuff, right? Or they know that the free stuff message does not work. So if you're looking even in Venezuela, there's a lot of people who understand that socialism does not work, and they're starting to consume more libertarian-like media, right? Because they're tired of hearing everything else, right? So I think that's what libertarians need to understand, is that even though for now you might be preaching to the choir, I even see on other alternative media channels that there are people who are pushing the whole status thing, and they're very naive on certain topics. But eventually those people, they're going to be proven wrong on many issues. And then as a result of that, they're going to look for something a bit more realistic. And they'll find that libertarianism is a bit more realistic than what people are proposing. And then they will naturally flood to you, because at least they can see, okay, you understand the nature of the state. Okay, you understand that free stuff is not a good message, or that it has consequences and stuff like that. So I think that's really the key. It's just you have to wait until people get tired of this, of this whole free stuff message, and then they'll look for something else, and then eventually they'll find you. So I think that's the strategy that I'm adopting, because I just think from when I speak to people about libertarianism, to them it sounds very esoteric. It's like, wow, okay, this guy's talking about the state and monopolies and what, and then this guy's just talking about free healthcare. Like, dude, I don't have money, and this guy's talking about free healthcare, so I might as well just go to that guy because he understands my needs. So that's the thing. So it's tough, but I think it's going to gain momentum, as people start to realize that, look, the whole statist ideal is not necessarily the greatest thing.
Okay, 100%. I did not expect your answer to be patience, because I could have just summed that out. Patience. I did not expect it to be patience.
Yeah.
But
right.
Yeah, I'll take that answer. Listen, we could go on and on. This podcast has actually gone very well. It's been a pleasure to have you here. You've been an excellent guest. I hope all of them are going to be like you, sir. And enjoy the rest of your nights. Is there any last words you want to share with our viewers?
Yes, I would. And by last words, I hope it doesn't mean you're going to execute me or something like that, right? But yeah. Because even with me, I don't like saying on podcasts any last word, because it always reminds you of somebody about to get executed. Like, no. Anything. But anyway. Huh?
Do you want the final word? Is that better?
Yeah, that's what the mainstream media uses. They say, hey, I'll give you the last word. But yeah, first of all, Simo, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it, right? So I enjoyed this conversation. It was really good, really refreshing to discuss the ManPatria journey and libertarianism in a nutshell. It was really great. Yeah, and then for those of you who want to know more about what I do, you can just go to my website, ManPatria.com. And you'll find everything there, social media, articles, and also future videos as well. Thanks.
There you have it, Freedom Fanatics. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. I've had a good time. I hope you have as well, sir. And see you again next time, because I'm definitely hosting you again.
Thank you.